Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech, where we go through the Bitcoin Optech newsletter. And this week we'll be going through newsletter number 306, published on 7th of June. I see a few new faces, so I'll just brief them up with regards to the format of this newsletter and the format of the session as well. The newsletter primarily contains of news articles, as the name suggests, regarding what is happening or what has happened in the past 1 week in the world of Bitcoin tech, some important or some noteworthy evolutions that have happened in the world of Bitcoin tech in the past 1 week. We try and cover them to the best of our ability. Then there's a section that's dedicated to releases and release candidates, any releases or release candidates for Bitcoin, any implementations of Bitcoin and any implementations of Lightning. Then there's a section, notable code and documentation changes. Again, any code and documentation changes that are significant in the Lightning Network or in Bitcoin. So primarily we discuss these things. And this week, like last week, the newsletter is pretty big. We will not be able to cover it in its entirety in 60 minutes. So we'll try and pick and choose things that we can discuss. We might not be able to cover the entire letter newsletter. All right. So yeah, starting with the preface of the newsletter. This week's newsletter announces an upcoming disclosure of vulnerabilities affecting older versions of Bitcoin Core, describes a draft BIP for a new version of testnet, summarizes a proposal for governance based on functional encryption, examines an update to the proposal for performing 64-bit arithmetic in Bitcoin script, links to a script for validating proof of work on Signet with opcode, and looks at a proposed update to the BIP21 specification of Bitcoin URIs. Also included are our regular sections announcing new releases and release candidates, plus summaries of notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure software. So this is what the newsletter comprises of, and let's see what topics can we discuss in this newsletter. If anybody has any questions or wants to share something, please feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. So the first news article talks about upcoming disclosure of vulnerabilities affecting old versions of Bitcoin Core. Okay, I'll just read through the news article first, and then we'll try and dissect it. Upcoming disclosure of vulnerabilities affecting old versions of Bitcoin Core. Several members of the Bitcoin Core project discussed on IRC a proposed policy for disclosing vulnerabilities that affected older versions of Bitcoin Core. For low severity vulnerabilities, the details will be disclosed about 2 weeks after the first release of a version of Bitcoin Core that eliminates or satisfactorily mitigates the vulnerability. So basically, this news article talks about how the Bitcoin community plans to tackle the disclosure of vulnerabilities. So we've discussed it in previous sessions that vulnerabilities that are brought to the attention of Bitcoin developers or Lightning developers, that if leaked out to the masses in general might lead to an adversary exploiting those vulnerabilities are kept confidential. So these vulnerabilities, when they are brought to the notice of Bitcoin developers, Lightning developers, are not published out or leaked out to the masses immediately, because if people in general get aware and acquainted about a vulnerability that exists in any of Bitcoin's implementations or Lightning's implementations, it's highly possible that an adversary might try to exploit that vulnerability. So if you or anybody comes across a bug or a vulnerability in any of the implementations of Bitcoin, or any of the implementations of the Lightning Network, then what one should do is disclose it discreetly with a trustworthy Bitcoin developer or a Bitcoin maintainer, and not leak it out to the public. So this news article basically talks about what plan Bitcoin developers have curated to disclose these vulnerabilities, right? Because these vulnerabilities are kept confidential until and unless they are not mitigated. And when the developers are certain that now it is safe to disclose these vulnerabilities, and now making the information pertaining these vulnerabilities available to the Bitcoin community possesses no danger, then they go out and spread the information pertaining these vulnerabilities. So like what's the roadmap? When do you disclose a vulnerability? When do you not disclose a vulnerability? What are the different categories in which vulnerabilities can be bifurcated depending upon the threat that they possess? That is what this article talks about. Okay, so for most other vulnerabilities, the details will be disclosed after the last version of Bitcoin core affected by the vulnerability reaches end of life, which is about a year and a half after it was released. For rare critical vulnerabilities, members of the Bitcoin core security team will privately discuss the most appropriate disclosure timeline to use. After this policy has a chance to be further discussed, it is the intention of the project to begin disclosing vulnerabilities affecting Bitcoin Core 24.x and below. It is strongly recommended that all users and administrators upgrade to Bitcoin Core 25.0 or above within the next 2 weeks. It is always ideal to use the latest version when possible, either the absolute latest version 27.0 as of writing, or the latest version in a particular release series, example 25.0 for the 25.x release series or 26.1 for the 26.x release series. Okay, so these are some recommendations that the author of or the curator of the Optech newsletter has given, that if anybody is running an implementation of Bitcoin Core, which is 24 or 24.1, 24.2, then they recommend that you upgrade it to at least 25.0 or above. Okay, because there are certain vulnerabilities that have been reported in this version of Bitcoin Core, which and these vulnerabilities have not been disclosed yet. They will be disclosed probably in the coming weeks. So it is recommended that you upgrade and move to at least 25.0 or above within the next 2 weeks. It is always ideal to use the latest version when possible, either the absolute latest version. So 27.0 is like the master branch of Bitcoin Core. Currently, it's the latest version, so that is the most recommended version by the developers, or at least or the latest version in a particular release series. So if for some reason you want to run Bitcoin Core 25.0 because you have a use case which is not compatible with 27.0 for whatever reason, then it is recommended that you use the latest version in that particular series like 25.2, or if you want to stick to 26 because of a use case of yours which is more compatible with 26, then it is recommended that you move to the latest version, that's 26.1. As has always been our policy, Optech will provide summaries of all significant security disclosures affecting any of the infrastructure projects we monitor, which includes Bitcoin Core. So the Optech newsletter almost always has a news article dedicated to the vulnerabilities, like when the vulnerabilities are safe to disclose, they generally disclose the vulnerabilities. So in the coming weeks we'll probably get access to some vulnerabilities that I believe are specific to 24.x, that is Bitcoin Core 24 and its subsequent versions. So we'll go through this. This properly articulates and curates the roadmap or the plan that Bitcoin developers have come up with to disclose bugs and vulnerabilities, what time frame they have come up with to disclose bugs and vulnerabilities, how they've classified different bugs and vulnerabilities depending on their severity, and what parameters are used to determine what is a high severity vulnerability and what's low severity vulnerability. We'll just go through this. This is pretty self-explanatory and will help us understand better what a vulnerability is, what are the ramifications of a vulnerability, and how they are classified. So back in September 2023, during the core dev in Azores, we, the group of Bitcoin Core contributors present, discussed we as a project should do a better job of tracking and disclosing security critical bugs. A bunch of us volunteered to dig up old reports, disclosed or not, set up some private infra to track vulnerabilities, and come up with a disclosure policy. The group comprised of Ava Chow, Michael Ford, that's Fanquake, Nicholas Gerger, Antoine Ponso, Anthony Towns, and Peter Wooder. These are among the most prominent Bitcoin Core developers, and these are the people that work on mitigating critical security related bugs. And these are the people that generally decide when it is safe to reveal a bug or a vulnerability to the masses and encourage them to upgrade to a latest version. In March 2024, during the core dev in Berlin, this group had another discussion regarding the disclosure policy involving other longtime contributors. It was decided to go through all the past reports which were dug up to inform our disclosure policy. If bug X was reported today, how should we treat it? So that basically this line is what sums up the plan of action, right? If the core dev team, the people that are responsible for mitigating uh, security bugs, if a bug is reported to them, how should they treat it? Like, what should be the plan of action? Following this, the group had a couple of calls to decide on a disclosure. So this is the disclosure policy that the group has come up with. When reported, a vulnerability would be assigned a severity category. So when the Bitcoin core developers, primarily comprising of these people and maybe even other, when a bug is brought to their attention, they will what they do is they classify that bug or that vulnerability based on the severity. Okay, so the vulnerabilities that are reported are bifurcated in groups based on their severity. How many groups? Four. We differentiate four classes of vulnerabilities. So the vulnerabilities or the bugs that are reported in Bitcoin Core are classified into four categories: low, medium, high, and critical. Now, how do you determine what's low, what's medium, what's high, what's critical? Here is like a skeleton based on which a bug or a vulnerability would be allotted to one of these four categories. What's low? A vulnerability or a low severity bug. Bugs which are hard to exploit or have a low impact. For instance, a wallet bug which requires access to the victim's machine. Okay, so this is an example of a bug or a vulnerability that could be reported in Bitcoin Core that goes into the low category. Okay, I mean this is not SOS. This is not very high priority. For instance, a wallet bug which requires access to the victim's machine. Okay, then medium, bugs with limited impact. For instance, a local network remote crash. High, bugs with significant impact, for instance, a remote crash or a local network RCE. And critical, bugs which threaten the whole network's integrity, for instance, an inflation or coin theft bug. So we've seen an example of what could be a low severity bug, a medium severity bug, a high severity bug, and a critical severity bug, depending on which the plan of action will be drafted by Bitcoin code developers, and they'll decide how to mitigate this bug or this vulnerability and how to eventually release this information in public and when it is safe to release this information in public. Now, one thing that I came across when I was reading this is the use of the word local and remote. Okay, so there are some bugs or some exploits which are local and some are remote. Would anybody like to take a shot on what does local here refer to and what does remote here refer to, and why is a local bug generally uh, medium category and a remote bug high category? Or basically, would anybody want to take a shot on what's local here and what's remote here? That's the first question that came to my mind when I was reading through this. What could be local and what could be remote in this context? Anyone?
Um, my guess would be that the local network refers to your own machine or the internet that you're connected to, and remote could be the node that your Bitcoin full node connects to, that in the peer-to-peer network. But yeah, I don't know if I have a good idea.
Yeah, more or less that's what it is. So basically, local basically refers to you having physical access to a device, for instance, or an ISP network, for instance, which you can use to exploit that vulnerability. Remote means that you do not have physical access or you do not need physical access to that specific device or that specific ISP network. So remote is basically difficult to sorry, local is basically difficult to pull off because you need physical access to device. So if you want to exploit a bug in a local manner, then you need access to that person's wallet or that person's computer or that person's ISP network. But remote is you can be anywhere in the world and you can exploit that vulnerability. So generally, bugs or vulnerabilities that require access to the local network or the local device are generally low or medium criticality, of low medium severity bugs, because it's not very easy for you to physically access somebody's ISP network or physically access their computer or physically access their wallet. But if a vulnerability can be exploited in a remote manner, meaning you can be anywhere in the world and exploit this bug or this vulnerability, then it becomes very severe. Okay, so if I can sit in my residence and get into your computer and exploit this bug and this vulnerability, then it's like a very high severity. But if I want physical access of your computer to sabotage your computer, then it's a relatively low severity because it's very difficult for me to have physical access to your computer. So that's basically what local and remote here refers to. That's why you see that the possibility where a bug can be exploited in a remote manner is high, and a possibility when a bug can be exploited in a local manner is relatively low or medium. So, reading further, critical bugs would most likely require an ad hoc procedure. Ad hoc means like it varies from case to case. Okay, so if the bug is very critical, you can circumvent the protocols, right? So you decide what are the protocols, what is the plan of action to mitigate bugs and vulnerabilities. But if it's a very critical bug, if it's an SOS bug, then you can circumvent those protocols, those procedures, and come up with an ad hoc procedure, meaning for each severe or a critical bug, you can come up with a procedure that suits that specific situation and circumvent the thumb rule or the protocols that you've drafted already. As they're very rare and it's hard to come up with a standard policy for those in advance, we do not consider them here. Instead, we focus on a standard policy for the large majority of the reports, which range from low to high severity. Right? So, an example that we can think of is the inflation bug that happened in Bitcoin long back. Okay, so in that situation, like if something of that sort happens, then mitigating those bugs are so critical that it is not necessarily, and you're not bounded by a certain protocol. Your priority is to immediately and as quickly as possible mitigate the threat posed by that critical bug. So in that situation, you go to a ad hoc procedure. A bug may also not get into any category at all. A reported issue may be considered seriously, yet not be classified as a vulnerability because it does not require seriously. Okay. If I read this again, a bug may also not get into any category. So if there might be a possibility that you come across a bug and it does not fall into any of these categories. A reported issue may be considered seriously, yet not be classified as a vulnerability because it does not require secrecy. Okay, so there might be a bug or a flaw that somebody might report in any of the implementations of Bitcoin, for instance, or any of the implementations of the Lightning network, for instance, which might not require secrecy. Okay, so not every bug or every vulnerability is of the nature that it requires discretion and secrecy. It might also be of a nature that it might be revealed out to the masses, and it might be a design flaw that the developers can look into to optimize the way the implementation functions, and without there being a threat of an adversary being able to exploit it. Low severity bugs will be disclosed 2 weeks after a fix is released. A pre-announcement would be made at the same time as the release. So if a bug is reported that falls in this category, okay, low severity, what's the plan of action for that? The bug will be disclosed 2 weeks after a fix is released. Okay. So like a new version of Bitcoin Core will be released, for instance, in which that bug will be mitigated. It will be disclosed to the people when 2 weeks after a fix is released. Okay, 2 weeks after a fix is released, that vulnerability will be disclosed so that people upgrade to the latest version. And then once people are given a time span of 2 weeks to upgrade to the latest version, then it will be safe enough to reveal that severity bug. And as we can see, even in the newsletter, it says that it is strongly recommended that all users and administrators upgrade to Bitcoin Core 25.0 or above within the next 2 weeks. So this gives us a hint that a low severity bug or a low severity vulnerability has been detected in Bitcoin Core 25.0, and it has been fixed and mitigated in the subsequent versions, and the users are being given a time of 2 weeks to upgrade. And after that, when in 2 weeks the users have upgraded, that vulnerability will be revealed or released, as is mentioned here. Low severity bugs will be disclosed 2 weeks after a fix is released. Pre-announcement will be made at the same time as the release. Then what about medium and high severity bugs? Medium and high severity bugs will be disclosed 2 weeks after the last affected release goes POL. that is end of life cycle. This is approximately a year and a half after it was released, as per announcement what we made 2 weeks earlier. So if the bug is of low severity nature, okay, it will be disclosed 2 weeks after a fix is released for it. And if the bug is of medium or high severity nature, then that bug will be disclosed when 2 weeks after the last affected release going UL. Okay, so every like Bitcoin cores, like let's talk about Bitcoin core. Okay, so Bitcoin cores certain version, for instance, has a certain lifespan, right? After which like upgrades or fixes for that version are abandoned. That generally is a year and a half. Okay, a year and a half. So if a medium or a high severity bug or a vulnerability is detected in a version of Bitcoin core, then that will be mitigated. And when will that be published or released out for the public to gain access to or be aware of? It will be released or disclosed 2 weeks after the last affected release goes EOL. That's approximately 1.5 years. Okay. So for low severity bugs, the disclosure will happen 2 weeks after a fix is released. And for medium and high severity bugs, the disclosure will happen 2 weeks after the last affected release goes EOL. That's approximately 1.5 years after the launch of the version which is affected with this bug or this vulnerability. Any questions, any thoughts, anything anybody would like to share pertaining what we've discussed up till now?
Just one question. This sentence, if you can scroll up a little, a pre-announcement would be made at the same time as the release. So the announcement is made with the release that there is a release, is it? And only after 2 weeks, the bug that required the release is revealed. Is that the correct interpretation?
So the pre-announcement refers to announcing the fact that a bug or a vulnerability has been detected in version X. What is that bug or what is that vulnerability will not be disclosed. That will be disclosed after 2 weeks. And we have an
Hmm.
example here. Okay, here it's mentioned that in Bitcoin Core 24.x, okay, a bug or a vulnerability has been detected. Okay, and it is recommended that within 2 weeks, if you're using this version of Bitcoin Core, you better upgrade to Bitcoin Core 25.0. What exactly is that bug that this version is affected by? We'll let you know after 2 weeks. Okay. So
Hmm.
for any version of Bitcoin Core, if a bug or a vulnerability is reported and if it's of low severity, it will be announced that a bug has been detected, it's been mitigated and upgrade within 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, exactly what that bug or vulnerability was will be announced.
Makes sense.
Right. We'll read through this plan moving forward. Announcement and request for feedback. Okay, so this is like a general to-do list for the Bitcoin community. Share with the wider group of Bitcoin co-contributors. Okay, so either if like you can share that this is the plan of action with the community. Okay, this is what the new plan of action that the devs have come up with to tackle bugs and vulnerabilities, that you share it with the wider group of Bitcoin co-contributors. Announce the policy to the wider Bitcoin developer community through the Bitcoin dev mailing list. Request feedback. We are not asking people to tell us how they think we should handle this. We are asking if this would be harmful to anybody for objective reasons we may have overlooked. Example of valid feedback. Okay, so here's an example. Like if you or I, after going through this disclosure policy, if you and I have a feedback, then what will be considered as a relevant feedback? What is the feedback that Bitcoin Core developers are expecting us to give them, and what is a feedback that they don't expect us to give them? So this is the example of a valid feedback that they expect from the community. An example of it is, I'm in charge of mining infrastructure. Okay, so this is like, assume Alice went through this policy, okay, and Alice has a feedback for the Bitcoin Core dev community, and this is Alice's feedback. I'm in charge of mining infrastructure. We are occasionally running a couple versions of Bitcoin Core behind for reason X. Given our past experiences, I believe it's possible for a business like ours to not be capable of upgrading within 2 weeks of the version we are running, going EOL for reasons Y and Z. This is unlikely. Still, I think a pre-announcement period of 1 month instead would make sure to err on the safe side. So if you are running a Bitcoin node, Bitcoin Core node, and you have a use case that does not allow you to upgrade within 1 month, like 2 week time span is very little for you. For some use case, you need 1 month, then you can give a suggestion that, hey, 2 weeks is very little. All right, after the P announcement, give us 1 month to upgrade. And what's the example of an invalid feedback? It's somebody saying, I just Googled CVE best practices, and here is how you should do things instead, or else it's an attack on Bitcoin. So somebody just goes to Chat GPT and goes to Google and finds the best CVE practices. Okay, and CVE vulnerability, I can't remember. It's like, I don't remember the full form, but this has something to do with vulnerability. V stands for vulnerability. So it's like a practice for mitigating vulnerabilities. So yeah, you just Google it and you go to Chat GPT and come up with some best practices and copy and paste the developers. They are not interested in this and they are not looking for this. Try to communicate it to a wider audience. Ping the Optech guys, etc. We want to publish historical reports. We also want to gradually start enforcing the policy to give the chance to everyone who didn't to upgrade. To this effect, we are going to incrementally disclose security bugs which were fixed in past releases up to the point where the bugs for all POL releases will have been disclosed. We'll start this month, June, with historical bugs, all which were fixed in 0.21.x and below. Okay, so all the bugs and vulnerabilities that were fixed in this version and below, I believe, are going to be released, which were not already released. We have undisclosed bugs for as old as 0.11. So bugs are not always disclosed to the community, but the devs are planning to disclose all the bugs that have been historically fixed, maybe as a timeline of the bugs or the vulnerabilities that have been fixed. Barring any good reason to change course through the feedback received from users, we would continue in July for bugs fixed in 22.x, in August for bugs fixed in 23.x. So in July, they plan to release all the bugs that are fixed in this version of Bitcoin Core 22.x, and in August for this version of Bitcoin Core 23.x. This was a news article that covered about basically what could be a vulnerability, what categories vulnerabilities could be bifurcated into, how vulnerabilities are tackled, and what feedback is the Bitcoin core dev community looking for from the community as a whole, how the community should report bugs and vulnerabilities, and yeah, pretty much it. So, any questions, anything anybody would like to share before we move forward to the next news article? Okay, if none, then let us move to the next news article, which talks about testnet 4. Before we talk about testnet 4, would anybody like to give a shot at what a testnet is? Testnet.
I'd like to take a shot. So, testnet is a network where Bitcoin, any changes and protocol upgrades to Bitcoin can be experimented with. Testnet has a proof of work blockchain, but typically has very low difficulty, and its average block time is, I think, less than a minute. And the entire point of having a testnet is to be able to experiment with any Bitcoin script upgrades or any upgrades for Bitcoin protocol itself as well, outside of mainnet.
Right, that's true. But yeah, somebody else also wants to talk.
Yeah. Why is testnet 4 in beta right now? What is happening? Why is it being reset often?
Yeah, we get to that, but right now we're just covering on the definition of what testnet is, so that to ensure that everybody who is participating knows what a testnet is. So, like, would you like to take a shot at what testnet is? Like, would you like to add something on what Shreyan said? What's a testnet?
Not really. I think he's on point.
One thing that I would like to probably correct on, I'm not really sure on whether the time span at which every block is mined in testnet is 1 minute. It depends on the difficulty. Like, you have to actually mine on the testnet, and that is why there's no predefined time.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's we.
Yes, reads little different when compared to your mainnet. That is to make sure that people don't accidentally send mainnet coins to testnet.
Right, but you agree with me, Bala, right? That there is no predetermined time that is
No, no,
set
yes,
for a block. Yeah,
yeah, you have to
yeah.
mind the coins. Yeah. Difficulties are a little different when compared to mainnet, and obviously the hash is different.
Right. Which hash? I'm not aware. Which hash do they
No,
use?
hash rate, but the hash rate that goes into it.
Your voice, you want audible.
The,
Are you saying
the,
that?
the
Yeah.
hash rate that goes into it is not the same as mainnet. That's what I was trying to convey.
Oh, okay. A hash as in the hash function, like we use SHA two
No,
fifty six.
no, those are all same. Just that whatever hashing power goes into the
Okay, difficulty. Okay. I got it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Basically, the computational power that determines the difficulty. That adjusts the difficulty.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not as difficult to mine blocks on the testnet as it is on the mainnet. Nowhere near, in fact. And a manifestation of that fact is that we have just one mainnet, right? We don't have different versions of mainnet. There's no mainnet 1, mainnet 2, mainnet 3. We've had only one mainnet since 2009. It's been 15 years and we have reached 800,000 blocks, slightly above 800,000 blocks, which is 8 lakh blocks, as we say in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. Anybody would like to guess how many blocks have been mined on testnet 3? Okay, so first there was testnet 1. We worked on testnet 1, then that was abolished. We moved to testnet 2. Even that was abolished. Then we moved to testnet 3. That's the third testnet. Okay, and despite changing two testnets or abandoning two testnets and working on the third testnet, can anybody like take a guess on how many blocks currently have been mined on testnet 3?
I'm looking at it right now. It's 28 lakhs.
Yeah, million. Right. It's 2.8 million blocks. 2.8 billion blocks. Okay. And as we were talking about, there is no predetermined time in which a block is mined on the testnet, but there is a catch. The catch is if no block is mined on the testnet for 20 minutes, then the next block will be mined instantaneously, meaning difficulty one. So if the last block mined on the testnet was X, okay, X, and it had a timestamp T, and then you're trying to mine a block that has a timestamp of T plus 20 minutes, the difficulty will be 1 and that block will be mined instantaneously. So testnet has been designed in such a manner that no 20 minutes should pass except that a block should be mined. Okay, because if the basic purpose for testnet is testing. And if you're not getting blocks, then you can't test it, right? So in 20 minutes, if no blocks have passed and then you're trying to mine a block, then the difficulty becomes 1 and instantaneously or immediately a block is mined. That is one catch. So if Alice mined a block X at time T and Bob is mining a block X plus 1 and the timestamp is T plus 20, that's 20 minutes, then Bob's block will have a difficulty of 1 and it will instantaneously be mined to ensure that no 20 minutes pass except that a block is mined on the testnet. That's one catch. Okay. So coming back to Mango's question, why do we have multiple test nets? I had not delved into it much, but like having casual conversations with a few Bitcoiners, what I was told is that slowly and gradually, I mean, testnet coins basically are not supposed to have any value, right? It's not like mainnet. Like mainnet coins are supposed to have values. Testnet coins are not supposed to have values. It's designed for the purpose of only testing. Okay. And because currently, if you're looking Mango, then as you mentioned that the block height is 2.8 million blocks on testnet. And can you guess what's the Coinbase reward? Like on the mainnet, it's 3.25 Bitcoins. On the testnet right now, what's the Coinbase reward? I think it's
It's
0.014 Bitcoins, right?
uh,
You can
I
just
think
click on some transaction.
I know because I thought if a Mango has it open, then he can validate it. But I'm pretty sure it's 0.014 BTC. Okay, so
okay.
if you want to test something, that amount might be very low for your use case, right? That amount might be very low for your use case. Uh, 0.01 for Bitcoin, it's a very meager amount for if you want to test something. Okay. And what happens is that generally people don't mine on the testnet. Okay, if you want testnet coins for testing something, not a lot of people go and mine it. There are faucets. People just go to those faucets and share their testnet address. Okay, and they get testnet bitcoins from those faucets. Or if somebody has testnet bitcoins, you tell them to share those bitcoins with you. Nobody actually goes and mines, because if you're getting only 0.01 for bitcoins by mining a block, then you probably have to wait 20 minutes to get 0.01 for bitcoins. And if your use case wants you to have one bitcoin or two bitcoin, then you have to spend a lot of time to acquire those bitcoins by mining them on the testnet, which doesn't make any sense. So people generally go to faucets and just get bitcoins, or people generally ask any of their friends or colleagues to send them testnet bitcoins. Now, what happens is that for this, it is very important that testnet bitcoin should not carry any value. Okay, because if testnet bitcoins start carrying value, then people will not be willing to give it for free on faucets, right? If I have 1,000 testnet bitcoins, I will not make them available on a faucet, right? Because if they are value, if people are willing to pay for it, if somebody is willing to give me $1,000 for one testnet Bitcoin, why will I distribute those testnet Bitcoins on a faucet for free? Or why will I give it to you for free for testing purpose, right? I'll sell them if I can get $1,000. So it's imperative that testnet Bitcoins should never carry any value. But at times, what happens is that people start selling testnet bitcoins. Okay, like the difficulty goes up and it becomes difficult to accumulate testnet bitcoins. And it has happened previously that people started trading testnet bitcoins. Okay, so like you give me a mainnet bitcoin, x mainnet bitcoin, and I'll give you 5x or 10x or 100x testnet bitcoin. So people started trading testnet bitcoin, and people started attributing value to testnet bitcoins. And that is why what was done is that the testnet was abandoned and a new testnet was started from scratch, and all the testnet bitcoins of the previous testnet were rendered null and void. Okay, so whenever this happens, that people start trading testnet bitcoins and they start ascribing value to testnet bitcoins, uh, the community shifts from one testnet to the another testnet. Okay, and the previous testnet is rendered as null and valid, and their points are considered to be of no use for any testing purpose. It's abandoned. So that is the reason, like, we had to shift 3 testnets. That is the information that I have. And now we're going to testnet 4. And another reason for switching to another testnet could also be fixing some bugs or some vulnerabilities, which is the case here. Currently, we're using testnet 3 and we're planning to shift to testnet 4 because of certain bugs and vulnerabilities. Now, what are those bugs and vulnerabilities due to which we might shift to testnet 4? Let's have a Fabian Jha posted to the Bitcoin dev mailing list to announce a draft brief for testnet 4, a new version of testnet designed to eliminate the problems with the existing testnet 3. See newsletter number 297. Jar also links to a Bitcoin core pull request with the proposed implementation. Testnet 4 has two notable differences from testnet 3. And what are those two notable differences? Fewer reversions to difficulty 1. It was easy, accidentally or deliberately, to reduce an entire period of 2016 blocks to the minimum difficulty 1 by mining the ultimate block in a period with a timestamp more than 20 minutes after the penultimate block. Now, period difficulty can only adjust downward in the normal way used on mainnet, although it is possible to mine all individual blocks except the first block in a new period at difficulty 1 if they have a timestamp more than 20 minutes after the previous block. So in the mainnet, how is the difficulty adjusted? Okay, it's adjusted based on the first block and the last block. Okay, so the timestamp of the first block is taken into consideration, and the timestamp of the last block is taken into consideration in a difficulty adjustment epoch, that is of 2016. Okay, so in this epoch, you take a look at the timestamp of the first block, and you take a look at the timestamp of the last block, and you take a look at the amount of time that was needed to mine these blocks. Okay, and based on that, you either increase the difficulty or you decrease the difficulty, and the difficulty can only be increased or decreased in a ratio of 4. So it can either be increased by 4x, or it can be either decreased by 1 by 4. Okay, but in testnet, that is not how it happens. In testnet, they only take into consideration the difficulty of the last block. Okay, so they will look into a time epoch of difficulty adjustment. Okay, and the final block. Okay, if the final block has a difficulty of 1, if the 2016 block has a difficulty of 1, then all 2016 subsequent blocks will have a difficulty of 1. Okay, so if the final block in a tile epoch has difficulty 1, then the next difficulty period will entirely have a difficulty of 1, meaning all the blocks 2016 blocks will be mined instantaneously. So which is being fixed, okay? Which is being fixed because it's possible for somebody to artificially change the timestamp of the penultimate block in a in a difficulty adjustment epoch by adding a timestamp 20 minutes in the future, okay, which will ensure that the final block is mined instantaneously, because we discussed if the timestamp of a block is 20 minutes in future as compared to its predecessor, then the next block will be mined instantaneously. So if the penultimate block timestamp of the penultimate block is 20 minutes in the future as compared to its preceding block, then the last block in the difficulty adjustment time period will have a difficulty of 1, which will lead to the next 2016 blocks having the difficulty of 1, and all the 2016 blocks in the next difficulty adjustment time period will be mined instantaneously, okay, which might not make sense for a lot of use cases. So that is being fixed now. Now the difficulty adjustment in testnet will also happen the same way as it happens in mainnet, okay? So it will not only take into consideration the penultimate block. How it will happen, we might not get time today, but you can look into this article where they mention exactly how it will be calculated. This is a post that has been sent to the Bitcoin dev mailing list, okay? But the point being, it will be similar to mainnet. All right. This is the one thing that is being proposed in testnet 4. Okay. And the second thing is a time warp attack. We've discussed time warp on more than a couple of occasions, I think, in the previous sessions. Okay. So briefly, what's a time warp attack? I think I have my notes open. I'll just go through it in like 10 seconds. Okay. So what's a time warp attack? A time warp attack is basically an attack which can be pulled off by a miner or a group of miners that have hash power in excess of 51%. Okay, so to pull off a time warp attack, a miner or a group of miners need to have a hash power in excess of 51%. Okay, so if you have a hash power in percent or in excess of 51%, you're basically dictating terms, right? You can manipulate the timestamps of the blocks. Okay, you can do whatever you want basically, and all the nodes will follow you, because your chain will always have the maximum proof of work, and because your chain always has the maximum proof of works, all the nodes in the network will follow your chain. So you can manipulate the timestamps, and your timestamps will be considered as the relevant timestamps, even though you've manipulated it, because your chain has the maximum proof of work. So if a miner has 51% hash rate, they can manipulate the timestamps. Okay. Now what they can do is they can increase the timestamp of each block by 1 second, okay, because that's the minimum increment. So for example, there is a difficulty adjustment period of 2016 blocks, okay, this is 2011 block, I'm just giving an example, okay. 2011 block has a timestamp of mtp plus 1 second. 2012 has a timestamp of mtp plus 1 second. 2013 has a timestamp of mtp plus 1 second. So for each block, you are increasing the timestamp only by 1 second. Okay, so all 2015 blocks, the timestamp you are increasing only by 1 second. The final block, okay, for the final block, you add the timestamp which is current time plus 2 hours, which is current time plus 2 hours. Okay, now you go to the next difficulty adjustment time period. Okay, now block number 2017. Block number 2017, again, you are increasing by 1 second. Okay, because block number 2017, for that, this will be the median block. Okay, the when we say mtp, it's the median timestamp of the past 11 blocks. So that is the sixth block. So for 2017, 2011's timestamp is the median time. Okay, because it's first block, second block, third block, fourth block, fifth block, sixth block. So for 2017, the median time passed, it's a timestamp of 2011. For 2018, it's 2012. For 2019, it's 2013, like that. Okay. So again, what you do is, here the timestamp is going to be 2 weeks beforehand, right? Okay, 2 weeks beforehand, because these are artificial timestamps. You start with block 1, you enter the timestamp of block 1, and from block 2, you increase only by 1 second. For block 3, again 1 second. Block 4, again 1 second. Till 2015, you only increase the timestamp by 1 second. Only for the final block, you add the current time plus 2 hours. Okay. So for 2017, your timestamp needs to be 1 second greater than 2011, which is 2 weeks. Early, okay, which is 2 weeks early. So this time epoch's first timestamp will be 2 weeks early. And then when you come to 4032, you again put the current timestamp plus 2 hours. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm will believe that to mine 2016 blocks from 2017 to 4032, it took 4 weeks. Ideally, it should take 2 weeks, but it took 4 weeks because this timestamp is 2 weeks early. And this timestamp is current timestamp plus 2 hours. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm will believe that to mine block 2017 to 4032, it took 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks. So it will decrease the difficulty by 50% directly. Okay, and if you keep on doing that, with every 2016 blocks, you can keep on decreasing the difficulty by 50%. So then it goes to 50%, then 25%, then 12.5%, then 6.75%. So the difficulty of mining the blocks gets reduced by half with every 2016 blocks. And this benefits the miners, right? Because if it's easy to mine a block, if it's easy to mine a block and you have 51% of the hash rate, you just keep on getting the Coinbase rewards. Okay, so this is what a time warp attack is. We've covered this in detail in preceding sessions for whoever would want to access them. I just thought of brushing onto it again. So that's what a time warp attack is, and this can also happen on the testnet. Okay, now this can also happen on the mainnet as well. Okay, and how do we fix it? We fix it with a proposal called consensus cleanup. So there's this soft fork proposal by Matt Corello called the consensus cleanup, and some people also call it the great consensus cleanup. Okay, in which he has talked about a bunch of bugs and vulnerabilities that have been in Bitcoin for quite a lot of time, and how one soft fork can fix them all. We've talked about the consensus cleanup as well in one of our preceding sessions. Okay? So the plan is to fix this time warp attack, possibility of this time warp attack in testnet 4 as well. It's possible in testnet 3, but with testnet 4, we want to implement the same mechanism as that proposed in the consensus cleanup soft fork, so that the time warp attack cannot be pulled off in the mainnet. Okay, and how does that happen? Again, the details of that can be looked into it into this one. Okay. To protect against time warp attack, the following rule proposed as part of the Great Consensus Cleanup is enforced. The end time field of each block whose height mod 2016 is 0 must be greater than or equal to the end time field of the immediately prior block minus 600. For the avoidance of doubt, such blocks must still comply with existing median time pass end time restrictions. Okay. So the final block, you take the block height and you perform a mod 2016. If it's 0, then you know that it's the final block of that time period. So the MTP of that block should be maximum 600 seconds. It should be maximum 600 seconds as compared to the MTP. So you can't manipulate it. You can't manipulate it. There's an upper bound of only 600 seconds. It can only be 600 seconds above the MTP. So this is how you kind of mitigate the time warp attack on the mainnet as well as the testnet. It's being discussed for the mainnet, but it might be implemented in testnet 4. So this is a proposal by Fabian Jar to switch to testnet 4 and to mitigate these two problems that the testnet currently suffers from. The fact that it's possible to reverse the difficulty to 1. How we mitigate that, we've covered it in this session. And to fix the time warp attack, what's the time warp attack and how it can be mitigated, we talked about that as well in brief. So yeah, that's what this news article talks about. So any questions or any thoughts about testnet 4, time warp attack, or anything that anybody would like to share before we move forward? I hope the broad idea was clear.
Yeah, in the chat I have posted a PDF of some details explaining the time warp attack. If anyone is interested, they can look at it.
Yeah, sure. How to access chat? This one, right? What a timestamp network. Okay, you prepared this for BPD, right?
It was part of BPD. The last part covers
Yeah, time warp attack. Right, time warp attack. Yeah, so yeah, anybody who wants to go through time warp attack can go through this PDF shared by Bala. Nice. Cool. Uh, we have 10 minutes, so what should we do? We'll not be able to cover another news article, I believe. Let's take another news article. Let's not go into the code and documentation changes. Let's take another news article. Which one should we take? Let's take this because we've talked about this earlier as well. Update of proposed update to BIP 21. So we've talked about BIP 21 earlier as well. Okay, BIP 21 basically is what it proposes is URI. All right, URI. So it proposes one single Bitcoin address that has fallbacks. Okay, so right now what happens is that if you want to share a mainnet address with someone, you have to share a different address. If you want to share a Lightning address with someone, you have to share a different address. If you want to share a silent payments address with someone, you have to share a different address. Okay. So what BIP 21 proposes is that you'll have one single address, okay, which will have your for instance Bitcoin P2P cache address, and that address will also have your Bitcoin silent payment address, and that address will also have your Lightning invoice address. Okay. And you can specify which address you want to be paid to, okay, and then the sender can query and find that specific layer on which you want to receive payment and make your payment. Okay, so for instance you can give a BIP 21 address to somebody who's using a Lightning wallet, okay, and they can scratch it and the Lightning wallet will detect your Lightning address. Okay, so that one address will have your Bitcoin P2P cache address as well. That one address will have your Bitcoin silent payment address as well. That one Bitcoin address will have your Lightning address as well. Okay, and if you give it to someone and you tell them, hey, I want to accept this, I want to accept payment on the Lightning network, then Lightning wallet will scan through that address or that QR code, okay, and make some query some parameters, and after querying that parameters, it'll find that Lightning address and pay you on the Lightning network, okay. And if you give it that same address to somebody who wants to pay you on the main net, okay, so they can also scan the same QR code, okay, and fetch your Bitcoin address and make a payment on the Bitcoin network. So for instance, if you want to receive a payment from someone but you don't know whether they can pay you on the main net or they can pay you on the Lightning network, right? So somebody owes you 10,000 sats, okay, but you don't know whether they'll be paying you on the Lightning network or they'll be paying you on the main net network. Okay, so instead of sharing two different addresses, okay, generally what would you do? You would share two different addresses, right? You would give them a mainnet address and you would give them a Lightning address and tell them, hey, whatever is more convenient to you, you can send the money. All right, I want 10,000 sats. You can either send on the main net or you can send on the Lightning network. It's up to you. But what BIP 21 does is that you can send them one address, okay, and on the same address, your Lightning information and your mainnet information both will be available. So if they want to send payment on the mainnet, they can send payment on the mainnet using the same address. If they want to send payment on the Lightning network, they can send payment on the Lightning network using the same address. If they want to send a silent payment, if they want to send a payment to a silent payment address, then they can make some queries and search for some parameters in that same address, okay, and send your payment on silent payments. We'll just read through this and then we'll probably go through an example of how this address looks like. Even though we've done this previously, let's refresh ourselves. So Matt Corello posted to the Bitcoin dev mailing list about updating the BIP 21 specification for the Bitcoin URI. As previously discussed, see newsletter number 292. Almost all Bitcoin wallets are using the URI scheme differently than specified, and additional changes to invoice protocols will likely lead to additional changes in the use of BIP 21. The major changes in the proposal includes, okay. So BIP 21 is not something new, okay, but some new proposals have been added to existing BIP 21, right? BIP 21 has been there for quite some time, okay, and there are a lot of wallets that are even using BIP 21, but there are some new proposals or updates that are being proposed to make to BIP 21. What are those? Primarily two. More than base 58 check. BIP 21 expects every Bitcoin address to use base 58 check encoding, but that is only used for the legacy addresses for P2P cache and P2SH outputs. Modern outputs use Batch 32 and Batch 32M. Future payments will be received to silent payments addresses and the LN offers protocol, which will almost certainly be used as BIP 21 payloads. So currently the standard BIP 21 protocol expects the users to only receive payments on base 58 addresses, which is the legacy address, but a proposal is being made that BIP21 should also the standard. Okay, like I believe there are a lot of clients that are using their own implementations of BIP21. Okay, they've customized BIP21 and they've already made Best 32 and Best 32N available. But this is talking about standardizing. Like the standard version of BIP21 expects only base 58 encoded addresses. Now this proposal aims towards incorporating best 32, best 32M also for BIP21 compliant addresses, and also silent payments, and also LN offers, which are referred to as bold 12 invoices. Okay. So yeah, this is the first proposal that the standard BIP21 address compliant address accepts only BS58 encoded addresses. This proposes to incorporate best 32, best 32M, silent payment, and bold 12 invoices, because these are like the modern addresses which are being used, and especially silent payments and LN offers. Their usage is expected to grow in the coming future. Empty body. BIP21 currently requires a Bitcoin address to be provided in the body part of the payload with query parameters providing additional information such as an empty, such as an amount to pay. Previous new payment protocols such as BIP70 payment protocol specified new query parameters to use. See BIP72, but clients that didn't understand the parameter would fall back to using the address in the body. In some cases, receivers may not want to fall back to one of the base address types, base 58 check, batch 32, or batch 32N, such as privacy-minded users of silent payments. The proposed update allows the body field to be empty. So up till now, what was happening is that in a BIP21 compliant address, you had an option of providing a fallback address, a default address. Okay. So for instance, you want somebody to pay you on the Lightning network. Okay. So you give them your BIP21 address. Okay. And now for some reason, they are not able to pay you on the Lightning network. Maybe they don't have adequate liquidity or whatever. So you always had this fallback address, okay, which was a default address. And hey, I want you to pay me on the Lightning network. Just in case you're not able to pay me on the Lightning network for XYZ reason, here's my fallback address. Okay. Then you send me a payment on this address. Okay. So that's like your backup or your plan B. But currently, what this proposal does is that it proposes that the users should have the option of not providing a fallback address. Okay, so for instance, I am a privacy conscious Bitcoin user. I only want to accept a payment via silent payments. Okay, I don't want to fall back to any other address. Either you give me a payment to my silent payment address, or I don't accept payment from you at all. I don't want a payment to the legacy addresses. I don't want a P2PKH payment. I don't want a P2SH payment. I don't want a P2PK payment. I don't want a Bolt 11 invoice payment. Either you pay me via on my silent payment address, or you don't pay me at all. Okay. So in this situation, you can have an empty body where you don't specify a fallback address, where the user either pays you on the network or on the address that you have specified, and you don't have a default or a fallback address. Either you pay me on this specific address or you don't pay me at all. That is one more proposal, that it is not mandatory for you to provide a default address or a fallback address. New query parameters. The updates describe three new keys: Lightning for both 11 invoices currently in use, LNO for LN offers proposed, and SP for silent payments proposed. It also describes how the keys for future parameters should be named. Okay, so like I mentioned, there are certain parameters which are mentioned in the address, which can be queried, or using which you can determine what avenues of payment this address accepts. Okay, so if the BIP21 compliant address accepts bold to 11 invoices, then there will be a query parameter called Lightning. Okay, so if you see this parameter Lightning, or this text Lightning in that address, it means it accepts bolt 11 invoices. If you see LNO, it means it accepts LN offers, that is bolt 12 invoices. If you see SP, then it means it accepts silent payments. Okay, so if somebody gives you a BIP21 compliant address, it has Lightning mentioned in it, it has LNO mentioned in it, it has SP mentioned in it. It means that you can use any of these to pay. You can either pay them via a bolt 11 invoice, you can pay them via a bolt 12 invoice, or you can pay them via a silent payment invoice. So these query parameters are used, using which the wallets can query, and if the wallet comes across this string of alphabets, then the wallet knows that, okay, I can pay to this address using bolt 11. If the wallet comes across this piece of string, then the wallet knows, oh, I can pay to this address using both 12 invoices, and if the wallet comes across this string, then the wallet knows, oh, I came across SP, so this address also accept silent payments. If you look into the code, if you just see, I think it's mentioned in the code. Yeah, it's whole files change. Yeah. So initially, as you can see, the standard specification of BIP21 is that it expected the users to transact only over base 58 encoded addresses, and now change has been made. Even batch 32 and batch 32M addresses will be considered as standard addresses to make BIP21 URI payments. Okay, and those query parameters should also be here. Yeah, so query parameters this has been added in the form of comment, I believe. Okay, so lightning. Okay, this query parameter or this string indicates that the address is compliant with bolt 11. Elno means it's compliant with bolt 12. SP means it's compliant with silent payments. And I think currently only asterisk was mentioned, meaning it was a placeholder for future implementations. Now there are three specific implementations that have been incorporated: Bolt 11 invoices, Bolt 12 offers, and silent payment addresses. And these are the query parameters that the wallet will look for while scanning. And if these parameters are found, then it means that the BIP21 address accepts payment over either one or two or all three of these modes of payment. So that's basically what the BIP21 is. You can also, before we wrap up, just see an example of how it would look like, how a BIP21 address would look like. Yeah, so this is a BIP21 address. This Bitcoin, I think, indicates the network. Okay, it's a Bitcoin network. Okay, because I believe other cryptocurrencies or other networks can also use this mechanism. So you're specifying that it's the Bitcoin network, and this is the address. Okay, address with the name. You can also add labels. Okay, label Luke Junior. Then you can also mention the amount that you want to receive. Okay, so this is the network. This is the address. This is the amount, and this is the label. You can also add a message. This is the address. This is sorry, the network, the address, the amount, the label, and a message that you want to add. Okay. And then some future implementations, reference implementations. This is an example of how a BIP21 compliant address would look like. Right. So basically, what it does is that it enables you to accept payments over different layers of Bitcoin and over different uh, what do you say? Mechanisms of addresses P2PK, P2PKH, P2SH, and base 58 encoded, batch 32, batch 32M, uh, uh, Lightning invoice, 11 invoice, Bolt 11 invoices, Bolt 12 invoices. You can just create one single Bitcoin address and accept payments over all of these different layers that I mentioned just now, and customize them and add messages, add labels, etc. That is what a Bitcoin compliant address is. And these are the three new proposals that have been mentioned by Matt Corello, three new proposals to update BIP21 further. This is what I had to share regarding this particular news article. Any questions, anything to share about this specific article? If not, then I options green. Cool. Whenever you listen to me, you can stop streaming. Yeah. Others, anything to talk about?